Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Welcome to the first edition of the FPL Roundtable, where we talk with FPL with some of the best minds in the community. I'm your host, Zofa, and I'm joined by my co host, Late Riser. How are you doing, Ella?
I am so excited, Zoff. We've just got such an illustrious group of people in the room right now. It's kind of surreal. Mourinho would call this FPL heritage. I'm just quite excited about this little experiment that we're having, and I'm hoping it leads to good conversation. I'm hoping it leads to stimulating conversation because it's a group of people that are clearly obsessed with this game. Zofar, why don't you just get introducing them? And before you do, how many top 10K, top 1K, and top 500 finishes do we have in the room today?
We have 38 top 10K finishes, 18 top 1K finishes, and 14 top 500 finishes. So these are just absolutely insane numbers. I'm really excited to start introducing our guest. First up, the new deputy editor of Fantasy Football Scout. He's asked to be referred to as a deputy for everyone's knowledge. And friend of the pod, Tom Freeman. Good to have you back again, Tom. How's the new gig coming along?
Cheers, Ove. Yeah, it's good. It's getting it's all getting very real now, isn't it? Start next Friday. So yeah, all good here. Thank you.
I've been loving your work, all the scout reports, fantastic stuff.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a Villa special over the last couple of days with Bailey and Ings, and quite exciting times.
Next up, one of the most recognizable faces on Twitter, writer for The Athletic and the host of the Athletic FPL Podcast, Mark Mcgettigan, aka FPL General. Glad to have you on here for the first time, Mark.
Yeah, good to be here. I've been a big fan of the FPL Wire from its inception, so it's nice to be joining you guys. And once I got that email from Late Riser during the summertime and seeing the names that were also in the email, I was very, very excited. So I've been looking forward to this one for a while. So yeah, thanks for having me.
A pleasure. Next, one of the friendliest guys around, a proper thinker of the game and one half of the amazing FPL Green Arrow podcast, Adam Hopcroft. Welcome on board, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'd echo the words of General. I'm really enjoying the work that you're doing, and been a big fan of the Wire pod, and I think you've taken it to a new level this season. So well done, guys.
Thank you. And last but not least, the founder of Fantasy Football Scout, co-host of FPL Black Box, and a name that's synonymous with FPL worldwide, Mark Sutherns. Pleasure to have you on board, Mark.
Hi, Zoff. Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to this. It's going to be a few hours talking about FPL with these guys. I can't wait. It's going to be amazing.
Really looking forward to it. So before we kick off, a quick word about our sponsors. DreamSetGo is a global portal for fans to gain access to sporting events around the world. Accommodation, flight tickets, hospitality, stadium visits, everything can be tailored exactly to your requirements. They also do celebrity experiences, which include masterclasses with your favorite sports celebrity or something as simple as birthday shoutouts. You can find links to the products in the description below. They are also tying up with some top-notch Premier League clubs, which we will be announcing shortly.
Also, the FPL Wire is a part of the Fantasy Scout network, and all the stats used on this podcast are from the FFS members area. Please sign up if you haven't already. Now, guys, let's get into this. The point of this is to not talk about this season at all, but instead just talk about our philosophies when it comes to FPL, our strategies when it comes to FPL. Just have a little bit of a macro discussion. And before we get into that, I just want to ease you guys in with sort of a fun round of rapid fire questions. So I'm just going to start with that, and I'm going to shoot them right at you guys and see what you guys come up with. It's a rapid fire question, so don't forget that. First question's for Adam. If, like FIFA, we had old players that can get into the game today, which one player would you want in the FPL world today?
What do you mean? If we could have any player,
player from the past that's been a part of your FPL story that you want back in FPL today?
Oh, okay. Do you know what? I'd go with someone like, I think Van Persie for me.
What about you, General?
Yeah, Van Persie came to mind. Cristiano Ronaldo as well, though, I think, as a Manchester United fan. I would take him back and captain for 38 game weeks, I think.
Mark, what about you?
I'd go for Henry, I think. Another Arsenal player, I guess. But yeah, Henry would be my choice.
One of the few 14 million players that we had in the game. That price seems ridiculous at the moment. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, Henry was the name which jumped out. He just made captaincy very straightforward when he was available, but amazing player.
Zoff?
Lampard for me, that's why he's on the wall.
Nice. For me, it's Aguero. He's been my secret weapon for the best part of last 6 years, and Aguero specifically under Pep Guardiola. All right, next question. I'll go to you, Mark, first. Your best friend has invited you to his 50th birthday party bash on an exotic island with no internet. This is a week-long trip, including the deadline for Game Week 1. Would you go? And the caveat is that you can't hand your team to anybody. You need to set your team up 7 days in advance.
Oh, that's easy, right? I don't have any best friends anymore. My only friends are people who play FPL, right? So there's no way a friend of mine would invite me to... That wouldn't happen. So, yeah, I don't have any friends who don't play FPL left. I've bored them all silly, so that's easy.
He's not answering that one. Adam?
Would I go? I think now I would, but previously, when I was going out with my wife, so in the first 6 months... parents were taking us on holiday to the Bahamas, and I made them fly us back on the Thursday just in case Villa got to the FA Cup final because I didn't want to miss it. We didn't get to the FA Cup final. I think we went out the next round, but yeah, I think I would go now.
General, would you?
Tough choice, but yeah, I don't think so. I would think I would just have to sacrifice the island. And try and get off to a good start. I think that's where my priorities are now.
Yeah. Tom?
Oh, yeah, no holiday.
No holiday. Zob, what about you?
I can't wait to get out of the house after this whole COVID thing. So I would make an exception this year, especially.
I'd go to, but I'd be miserable for those 7 days on that island. That's about it.
You'd figure something out, wouldn't you? You'd get carrier pigeons or something to get you delivered.
Something of that sort, yeah. Probably just set up the internet there if we had Mark with us. All right, next question's for you, Tom. We're going to go to you first. If you could use only one of Ben Crellin or Live FPL for the season, which one would you pick? And it means that if you're using Live FPL, you are not aware of effective ownership.
Oh, if I could only use one, I'd probably have to be Ben, just because of that knowledge that he's got around, the doubles, and that is key to the whole strategy of your chips each year, isn't it? So, yeah, I'd have to take Ben, I think.
Mark?
This is unfair, isn't it? Okay, I'd have to go Ben as well because I guess he was here first, right? So, yeah, well, I'll go Ben because double game weeks. I think his insight into that is quite unique. Whereas we did live without EO quite happily. It's handy now it's about, but, as I say, Ben was here first, so we'll go with Ben.
I'm team Ben too. Is there anybody here who's going to go without Ben Crellin for the season?
No.
Clean sweep.
Clean sweep. All right. Next question is a really interesting one. So I'll come to you, General, first. From this panel, the 6 of us, if you could pick one manager to create your Game Week 1 team, and if you could pick one manager to create your Game Week 38 free hit team, who would they be? You can pick two separate managers.
Two different managers then.
Yeah.
Great question.
Good question. I think I'll do the free hit one first because I think that's a bit easier. That'll be yourself, Late Riser, I think. You like your exciting picks, so I think that's more suited to a final fling in Game Week 38. In terms of Game Week 1, probably Zof, because I think we're quite similar in the way we play the game. I know we speak quite often on Twitter and stuff, and there's only usually maybe 3 or 4 changes within our team. So yeah, Zof for the slow and steady season start, and Late Riser for the final game week.
Adam, what about you?
Yeah, I would go. I think there's the similar thinking, so I would probably go fairly safe at the start of the season. So I think it would be Zoff or General. I think so. I'll go with General because on that, and then I think for the last game week, it's either yourself or Mark. So I'll go with Mark for a bit of fun there. Bit more maverick, and particularly if you're going to try and attack a good rank at the end of the season.
Let's go to Mark with that then. Who do you reckon, Mark?
Yeah, I probably would go you for the end because you do something, dramatic, wouldn't you, for the final game week?
Absolutely.
And then you wouldn't, you do something crazy and it.
What about though if you were first? What about if you're first in the world? Would you put?
Would I trust Pranil with my last game?
Exactly.
Imagine that! Wow.
Everyone else
True story.
My God. Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Oh, I don't think about being first in the world, Adam. That never crosses my mind. No, I'd go Adam from the start though, because the trouble is every time I listen to Green Arrow, I always agree with Adam, right? So either we think identically, or it's just Fergie. I can't stand Fergie. I don't know which one it is, Adam. No,
Probably the latter.
No, it's not. I agree with Adam an awful lot, it seems. So I'll go Adam from the start.
Zoff, what about you?
I think actually General said is spot on. He's the guy I would trust with my Game Week 1 team because we have very similar playing styles. For the Game Week 38, probably Mark. I think he's probably the best at identifying those explosive differentials in the last few weeks.
All right. What about you, Tom? Let's ask you this question.
Tricky one. I'd probably pick Mark for the Game Week 1 team just because of the amount of research he's putting in a black box these days. I'd feel quite comfortable handing my team over to him. And then for 38, I think I'd pick Adam because even if it were to go wrong, we'd have 3 Villa players in there. So I'd feel quite comfortable.
Like that.
Yeah. So Mark and Adam, I think.
For me, it would be Tom with the Game Week 1 team because he always, out of nowhere plucks out the mid-price punts that are always hitting the mark.
Bamford last year, wasn't it?
He's doing it every season. His Game Week 1 team, you need to watch out for those mid-price punts because he's on the money with them every season. That's what I messaged him 2 days ago as well. And Game Week 38 would be Mark for me as well. I think he's got a good balance and I think he's going to go very aggressive, and that's how I like playing Game Week 38. So it's going to be Mark. All right, and the last one of this fun round before we move into the serious stuff. What's your weirdest FPL superstition? I'll go to you, Adam, first.
FPL superstition. Come back.
And you can say, no, you don't.
No, come back to me on that one because I'd be interested to see some of the other responses. There's nothing that springs to mind, but I'm sure it will do.
I'll start with this one. So whenever I have a 50-50 captaincy call and I can't decide, I let my wife pick. And that's led to some really good-looking hauls, but I've done that. And I've done that in double game weeks as well. So she's picked some monster hauls out for me. I won't say which ones, but she's done that.
You're still together, Prano, yeah?
Yeah, we're still together. Tom, what about you?
I honestly don't think I have anything kind of remotely interesting to share in terms of that. I'm not a particularly superstitious person. I don't think there's anything I can really add to it.
You're just a nice, cold, good manager. That's all there is to it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. General, what about you?
There's probably a couple of things I do. I don't think they're that weird. I think a lot of people do them. The first one is when you're setting up your team. For example, if you've got Trent and Robbo, Trent has to be in the right back position. Robbo has to be left back.
Yeah.
And your centre back has to be in the middle. And also trying to get the shirt symmetrical in terms of colour as well as much as possible. And that can take quite a long time sometimes. You have to do a lot of
that's
manual
OCD,
substitutions.
That's OCD.
Yeah, maybe it's not superstition.
Can I ask you
What happens if you've got 3 left backs, Mark?
Yeah, exactly. Because I've had Luca Dean, Shaw, and Trent. Yeah. How do you make that work? Because none of them would play centre back.
Yeah, well, one of my drafts had Robbo, Shaw, and Dean, and straight away didn't like it. Too many left players in there. There's no balance, so it's never going to work. Yeah. The other one then is just a superstition on a if the deadline's on Saturday morning, just don't log in on a Saturday morning. Transfers are made by say 10 o'clock Friday night, unless there's a major injury. I'm never on the website on Saturday morning.
But you're on Twitter following the news, if there is any.
Yeah, I'm just watching the chaos, sitting back with a cup of tea.
All right. So General is always there on Twitter Saturday morning. One thing to know. Mark, what about you? Any superstitions?
Yeah, I didn't think I had one. Then I did think of a good one actually. So if I've got a defender playing and it's 0-0, I never look at the BPS points. Because I found that when I look at the BPS points, it's a James Justin thing. You look at the BPS points, and I had James Justin at home to Newcastle last season, and he'd done nothing, the usual thing. Like, he hardly touched the ball, but he was top of the BPS for some reason. And then Andy Carroll scored about 30 seconds later. And ever since then, I said, right, I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to look at the BPS because that's just asking for trouble. So that's what I do now. If it's 0-0... and I've got like a vanilla defender who's not going to score me a goal and like that, but I'm just clinging to those BPS points, I won't look at it. It's tempting, but I just don't look at it until the end, and then it's a pleasant surprise if they get the free.
Yeah, that happens to me a lot of the times when those clean sheets are coming in. I don't look at my phone for the last 6 minutes. I just want to not look at any notifications. Zoff, I wouldn't have thought of you to be a superstitious guy. Any superstitions?
I don't change my captain on the day of the deadline. I'm surprised how many similar answers General and I are giving. Really shows how similar we are.
Yeah. Adam, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, there's a few actually. So I do exactly what Mark does, General does on the setting up my team. I don't like it when players are playing out of position, but I think it is a little bit too linear, isn't it? With the 3-4-3 or 4-4-2, you can't put anyone in the hole, particularly with the likes of De Bruyne and Fernandes and all of that. So
can't have the little arrows either to tell them to attack.
Yeah, exactly. Get your championship manager formations on there. The other thing which I think a lot of people do is I set up my team. The second that I can log back in, I set up my team for the following week. And I don't know if I'm pretty sure probably all of us would do that. Maybe it'd be weirder if people didn't do that.
I don't.
Yeah. Was it from was it Always Cheating podcast? They're getting hit by a bus theory or the bus team.
Bus team, yeah.
So yeah,
it goes that step further for me now. If I do set my bus team, but also if I'm standing crossing the road and a bus is coming, I'll think about Always Cheating and I'll think about my team.
I love it. I love that. And then the only other thing is I won't make a transfer before 10:30 on a Friday night because I'm more paranoid something will get leaked in the press and
the embargo. Yeah.
So I'll just wait for the embargoes and before. So there's been a lot of 10:31 transfers or just before. But yeah, I won't do that.
Yeah, you have the luxury to do that. It's 3 a.m., 10:30 your time. So
you got marginal gains and all of that. So
yeah, exactly. All right, so that was just to ease you guys in and settle in, and now we'll get into the serious stuff now. So let's start this discussion based on why you think you've been a successful manager. Are there any traits that our listeners or viewers can learn to adopt from you? And a follow-up question to that is, have you changed as a manager in the past 3 years in trying to adapt to this fast-growing game? I'll come to you first, Mark.
I think with me, there's not one particular trait that I display above all others. I am fairly maverick, but I'm not known for it as much as you, perhaps, Pranil. But I think it's just the ability to use the years of experience I've got playing the game and change my tactics accordingly, depending on what the season gives us. I think I am quite flexible and I adapt quite quickly. I think I use data all right. I mean, I think I tend to do better in the second half of the season or after 7 or 8 game weeks when the data is there and I can use it. I tend to feel more comfortable after that period. Like the first 6 or 7 weeks are very difficult, I find. I don't feel like I'm scrambling in the dark, but it's not far off where you're kind of like watching football and that's all you got to go on really. And then after 6 or 7 weeks, the data comes in. So I think, my use of data is good and I'm flexible and I'm not scared of taking a risk or two with price changes and with the odd maverick pick. But I think I do it okay, moderately. I don't go crazy like Luke does. I take it at the right time, and I think that's part of the skill is like when to take a risk and when to stick. And I think I get those calls right some of the time, and if you get them right some of the time, you do quite well. So I think that's it really. It's not one particular trait; it's a combination of those things.
Anything particular that you've developed as a habit that has worked in your favor, maybe in the past couple of years?
I think, obviously the last couple of years I've paid more attention to why I'm making calls and decisions and I've been more conscious of that and I think that's helping me. I think it helped me last season. I did tend to make my transfers based on like emotion a lot, I think, in the past and maybe got away with it. Like there'll be a player that I see on Match of the Day or in a live game or some data that I see and go, right, that's my transfer. That's what I'm definitely got to get that player in. And then I'll transfer out a player who's been effective for me, but it's, I need to get that player out to get the player in that I really want. And then it backfires on you. And I think I did that less last season and I will do it less from this point forward. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's, if I got away with that in the past, I was very lucky because I think it is silly to transfer out a player who could get you points. And it's much better to try and focus on weaknesses.
All right. The Fabio Borges weak link theory. He always talks about that in his articles as well. Tom, what about you? I remember you coming onto our pod last year and talking about nothing beats sheer hard work and grafting in terms of getting with the times. What do you think other managers can learn to adopt from you?
I suppose planning, is quite important and trying to visualise where your team is 5-6 game weeks down the line, taking in mind, captaincy, big fixture swings, that kind of thing. And I think if you are planning ahead, it makes you feel a bit more in control. And as soon as you lose that control, that's when you start making rash decisions and you're panicking and you're making hits. So I think planning is kind of what I've always enjoyed, and it's really helped me as well. So that would probably be the main thing that I'd advise people to get, even if you're doing it yourself on a spreadsheet, just a transfer planner, having in mind, some things have to change, of course, but just having in mind the moves that you want to make in 3-4 weeks and then react to that as you go along.
Zoff, what about you? You've never spoken about this on the wire, actually.
No, but I think you can understand by my playing style. I'm a very patient person by nature, so I back my picks for a longer period. I give them a lot of time to deliver, and I'm also very process oriented, so which helps. I have a way, like a process where I make my decisions, a structure I usually follow, so that helps guide me through that. But in terms of adapting my game, this has also created a problem because now it's become rotation is pretty much a byword at every team now. Every team has some sort of rotation. You can't really always avoid players with game time risk nowadays. So I struggle with that with Pep primarily.
Yeah, you mentioned that on the last pod or in the article that you wrote for the Scout as well, where you said that, playing that sort of way gets you to 30, 40K, but you need to do something out of that, over and above to get into the top 10K, 5K as well. We'll talk about that later in the season. General, what about you? You talk a lot about psychology, so I'm assuming your answer will be about that.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Is I think I'm good at managing myself and my emotions. I think I wasn't as good last season, maybe, as I was in previous seasons. But I think when I think back to my best FPL seasons, characteristics are just safe, boring. And again, me and Zof, I think he's my brother from another mother, because I'm just a very, very patient person, which makes me a very, very patient FPL manager. I'm like Adam, very often 10:30, 11 o'clock on a Friday night is when you'll be making my transfers. And I always just try and minimize the amount of transfers that I make. So I'm going into seasons thinking, hoping to make around 40 transfers if possible. Just focus on your weakest link and trying to manage your squad well, in order to minimize, having to take those hits. So trying to avoid them by just managing your squad well. And I remember, talking about have I tried to change or anything in the last couple of years. I remember specifically maybe 3 or 4 seasons ago, pre-season discussion and really getting roped into the taking hits approach. And people really talked me into it and talked up the benefits. And I said, you know what, I'm going to try this. And it didn't work because it's not me. And I've said often before, one of the most important things in FPL is you've got to find out what kind of manager you are, which can take a couple of seasons, and then play your game. Because if I go and try and play like you, Pranal, which I would love to do, I just know it wouldn't work for me. I always think it's like, Sean Dyche, is he going to make his Burnley team play like Man City? No, because it's not going to work. So I'm a boring manager. It's served me well over the years, so I just try and stick to what's worked for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's spot on. I think you need to be aware of your skill set and your temperament more than everything else. Adam, what about you?
I've asked myself this question a lot over the last 6 months, because I think my biggest strength was something that I probably tried to take away from myself, and that's being really open-minded and flexible. And it doesn't help when you're in Twitter sphere. It doesn't help when you do a podcast, because people want opinions, don't they? And I think my biggest strength was always, I was quite open-minded. I would change my mind if I felt towards the back end of the week. So I was quite good at getting rid of biases. And I don't think you can ever get that perfect, but I think I was flexible. And when I was talking on the Green Arrow yesterday, my whole approach for the start of the season is you're just starting with a blank canvas, keep it neutral, and then react when you've got some data. Don't worry about, go for the safest picks. And it sounds boring, but it's about putting yourself in a position to react. I think one of the challenges that I've faced is, because what used to make me quite good is that my decisions tend to be based off research, data, and I would also look into psychology, but more from like the player's perspective as well. And I don't think people do this enough. You do it a lot because you'll read fans forums, you'll read like the local press around them. But I think if you take a really good example of this, is like Jesse Lingard last season. The stats weren't particularly there, but there was the feel-good factor. And if you're in a job, and I genuinely believe this, whatever job you're in, if you have that spell where you've got confidence and you're speaking, whatever you're doing, and I think you can overperform, and that's where the variance does come in, because the reality is, over a long period, it's really difficult to use data to predict FPL because of variance, and the only way you can predict variance is other factors that might influence that. So you take Werner, for example. It's quite clear last season he was low on confidence at times. You saw him trying to finish. You never felt he was going to score. But there'll be other players that, for a spell of 4 or 5 game weeks, everything they hit goes in. And I think sometimes, maybe because of there's such an emphasis on stats, we forget all of this, that actually people are human, and they can be confident and they can overperform. And at some point, it will revert back to the mean and the variance will go. So there was always factors like this, which I used to look at. And I think probably reading more up on stats, I've taken it out of my game a little bit. And that's something I want to go back to this season a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, out of everything, I thought that was a great answer, by the way. And out of everything that everyone hasn't mentioned, the only thing I want to add, and I can say that something that's common in all 6 of us, is you need to put in the graft. You need to be aware of everything. The game that we play is quite an exhausting game. You need to be aware of teams and so many managers and player styles, and to be on top of manager quotes and all of that. So you need to put in the hours if you really, really want to, get into the top 10K, 5K, because I think that's something all of us do. We're obsessed with this game. Let's talk about the negatives, though. Are there any traps in FPL, and what's your weak link as a manager? Zof, I'll come to you first.
Now, the other side of being patient is often you can be too late to react on players. But I often wait too long, wait 3 to 4 weeks to buy the player who's performing well. And by that time, his ownership is way too high for him to be a differential. So that's my problem. I don't know when to not be patient, when to jump off.
Yeah. One trap that I witness, and I see a lot of that on Twitter actually, is thinking that if you've done well this season and if you've played a certain way, there's a thinking that if you play this way next season, you're going to do well as well. You sort of try to templatize FPL, and I don't think you can templatize FPL. So I think that's a trap that people fall into, thinking that this worked for me last season. And that happened to me last season where I had a miserable year. You need to read the room. I think that's just very important instead of templatizing FPL. Tom, any traps you think that FPL managers can fall into?
Yeah, I think disregarding a player because of like a previous experience you've had with them or a perception of that player. When I think about John Stones last year, he came into that City team, and I think everybody at the time was expecting, previous experiences with him was that he would make mistakes. He came in alongside Diaz. He suddenly looked very much more assured, but I do think some people maybe had a problem believing that until 6 or 8 game weeks into that partnership. It's quite clear from the off that he was confident. He was in the right kind of setup. They had the right protection behind him. So I think you kind of need to go into each season with an open mind on those players. And, for next season, and like Pepe in a 4-2-3-1, for instance, or somebody like Semedo, who perhaps we've had, bad perceptions of in the past. It's kind of like wipe that slate clean and start fresh, because you might be bringing them in this year, and that's kind of a trap which I think is quite an easy one to fall into.
Yeah, it ties back to what Adam was saying earlier. It's so important to just have a clean slate. You can't have any biases in your head. Mark, I'll come to you. Any traps that people need to avoid in FPL?
Yeah, I think I've got my favourite players. I'm obviously biased towards some of those, and sometimes it works in your favour, like it did with Lingard last season, and sometimes it works against you. So you've got to be wary of that. And I think the other one for me is ownership. I think I do get influenced by it. I mean, last season I went with Werner purely on the fear of the fact that he was heavily owned, and I didn't want him. And then when I made that mistake, I mean, even captained him, I think, game week 2 at West Brom. Didn't come in, of course. And it's worse when you know that, okay, I made that decision not because I wanted to, but because I did it out of fear. And those are the mistakes that are hard to forgive in yourself. Whereas if you make a decision based on, no, I've got a gut feeling I'm going to go with it, or I've seen the data, I'm happy with that call, it's easier to forgive that mistake. You can look back and go, yeah, I can justify that to myself. But when you make a call out of, well, I need to get that player because look how many people have got him, and if I don't get him, I'll fall behind. I've got that with Bruno this season. I'm kind of thinking, well, I don't really want to go with him, but look at that ownership, and what if people captain him? And I want to be brave enough to go without him, and if that's a mistake, that's okay. But if I go with him and then he blanks the first 3, I'm going to kick myself and go, that wasn't me deciding that was the ownership. So it's backing yourself, really. I've got to learn to do that more often.
And that's really interesting because it links back to my point as well, because last year I didn't own Bruno until I think I played my Wildcard in about game week 16. So I missed out on that Leeds haul, I think it was, when he was at home, when he got 16 or 17 points. And I always keep thinking of that defined my season, because it felt like I was playing catch up after that. I think I captained Harry Kane against Leicester, who didn't do anything. And so my position now is, it goes back to my point, is that I'm thinking about that, and do I want to put myself through that with Fernandes again, when really I shouldn't take that into account at all. And I should just decide now on the merits of if Bruno is worth starting with this year. So it's maybe easier said than done. So
you're managing your emotions, and I know if I don't have Bruno, it's going to be torture watching United and the anxiety that causes. And the easy way out of that is just pick Bruno, and he might not get you as many points, and you might have been right, but then so it's a toss up between having that anxiety, but then making the decision that you want to make for the right reason. So it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Is this the case now, or was this the case, let's say, 5 years ago as well? Yeah, we are aware of effective ownership now. We did have ownership percentages visible to us maybe 5 years ago. Were you mindful of ownership 5 years ago, Mark?
I was, but I think being, given that there's a lot of content creators out there, and you're aware of that as well, and you're aware of I don't want to be the only content creator not going Bruno, because then I become the champion of being the anti-Bruno, and it's not that at all. It's just a simple decision about not having a player. It's not like you become the representative of the no Bruno kind of cause. It's ridiculous, but so I'm conscious of that as well, because already there's there's a Bruno movement on Twitter and stuff like that. It's like, blimey. It's only a decision over a player, and I'm allowed to get him. So, I think it's got worse because of that, because of the whole kind of Twitter scene as well. We're more aware of not only ownership in the game, but ownership in the community, aren't we?
Yeah, I think what one of us needs to do is talk about, let's say in your case, talking about going without Bruno all through preseason. And I want you to change your mind the last second, because that can happen. I mean, when we were playing the game 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when people weren't following our moves or understanding what we're doing, it happens in the last hour when you change your mind. And I think that's okay. I just think that's okay.
I'll tell you what, there'll be uproar if I change my mind, though. Do you reckon I'll let that go? No chance.
Nope. Definitely not.
But I think you should set an example and do it anyway.
Yeah, well, I might do.
Yeah. General, I'll come to you. Traps, weaknesses?
I think the biggest trap nowadays, and it's quite similar to Mark's point about ownership and stuff, but it's more about falling into the trap of not making your own decisions. It's mainly to do with the Twitter bubble. So most of us here, and I'm sure most of the listeners and viewers, if they're serious about fantasy, they're probably pretty active on Twitter. They don't have to be tweeting, but they're probably following us guys and many others as well. And for example, going into game week 1 now, I haven't tinkered much, but I know for a fact there's 3 or 4 players in my current draft who wouldn't be there if I wasn't on Twitter, because I'm on Twitter way more than I should be. And even if you're scrolling through your Twitter feed and you're saying, I'm not going to look at any drafts that I see, but you still have to scroll by them, and one player will catch your eye as you scroll by. Tony's an example. Buendia. It's there's so much information out there, and the trap is you end up following the crowd, and then maybe regretting it after a couple of game weeks in. Why did I just do what everyone else was doing? I didn't have that much faith in that player. I always say to people, especially in game week 1, when it comes to Friday of the deadline, go through every single player individually. Ask yourself, did I pick this player? Do I want this player? Or did Twitter pick this player for me? And it's quite hard. It's quite hard to do, because then you've got the FOMO of the ownership as well. And I know I've got that issue. We're 1 week away from season now. I know that's something I need to do myself before game week 1. There's a couple of players I'm going to have to take out and make sure the players that I bring in are the players that I really want. So yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard not to get caught up in the crowd.
It's something I struggled with last season as well, and I've had that as in my notes. Deal with content creator bias, because all of us have our biases, and all of us are talking about really good things. We give out really good information, but everybody has a bias, and you need to be a little bit mindful of which content creator has what bias. If you fancy listening to some podcasts or etc. Because earlier it used to be data-focused articles. I used to read scout notes, which were giving us data, not opinions. It was information, not opinion. So if you're listening to opinion-focused podcasts, I think you need to be aware of content creator bias. That's something I struggle with.
I think an important point on that as well, if you're listening to podcasts or you're reading lots of articles, don't always go to the ones that suit your play style. You know, I love listening to podcasts to someone who plays the game completely different to me, you know, like yourself, Branel or Mark, because I always find, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I've got my thought process. I'll sit down with a Wire or Black Box on Thursday. And what I like about them most is it challenges my current thinking, and it'll make me think about things maybe I hadn't been. And just because I'm, you know, quite set Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's fine to change your mind on a Thursday or Friday. Even if you've mentioned it on Tuesday's podcast, we're allowed to change our mind. Yeah, some people will get upset, but hey, it's my team. I don't care if you get upset. So yeah, very important. You know, like I say, don't just listen to podcasts that suit your play style. Be open-minded to other play styles as well.
Adam?
So I agree with all of the points that have been made, but just to throw in something different, I think FPL is quite an easy game when you're doing well.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the ability to manage when things aren't going your way. I know you've talked about this quite a bit, General, and it's not just, it's a number of things. It's your mental health, firstly. It's the ability to deal with a bad game week and not let it have knock-on decisions. So the amount of time where people are getting a few red hours, well, I need to take a few hits to correct it, or they'll go outside their playing style. And there's been times it's happened to me where I'll get like 4 or 5 or 6, probably even more than that, red arrows in a row. And then as soon as I get a green arrow, it'll go the other way. And, you know, and I think there's a lot of factors that contribute into that. I think it's your emotions. I think you need to have like a bit of a plan. If things are going badly, maybe you shut off. You don't watch the games that weekend. You go and do something with your family. You might do the match of the day challenge, which I know General's a big advocate of. And I did a few times last season where it wasn't going for me. And do you know what? It made FPL fun again, or you made I think it's the intrigue of waiting for the results. It added that to it. So I just think you need a plan, because you mentioned live FPL earlier. I think it's an absolutely great tool, but it can also be the worst tool where you can check your rank in the middle of a game, in the middle of a match. Or so-and-so's just scored. What's it done to my rank?
Before a match now.
Pardon, what did you say? Sorry, Pranav.
There's a what if tool. You can check that before a game now.
Oh, don't. Yeah, I saw that. Exactly. What if all of these things? So I think it's that ability to deal with when things aren't going your way. Have a plan. Have a way to unwind. We all love FPL, but at the same time, we've all got stuff outside FPL that we can do to take our mind off it. Because the worst thing is, and I'm sure we've all been there, where you'll go and take it out on your family, your friends, and you know, all of that, just because like your captain's blanked and you went a little bit rogue on your captain, and the other captain that everyone's gone for has hauled. And I think it's just that whole dynamic that I think is really important to get right. And if you can manage it well, it gets you back on an even keel quite quickly, and you don't have those big slopes of getting red arrow after red arrow after red arrow.
Yeah, it's so easy to it's so difficult to not go on tilt over a period of 9 months. It's a long, long time, you know, to maintain that sort of mental discipline. Do you guys struggle with a bad game week? It's easy for me to just switch off in the night. If let's say I don't own a Son and he scored a hat-trick, I switch off the game that time and I'm not thinking about FPL until next morning, and it's just easier next morning. Do you guys struggle? Mark?
Yeah, if it's a decision, if Son got a hat-trick and I did genuinely make want to get him in but didn't for another reason, like ownership, for example, I would beat myself up about it. But if Son got a hat-trick and I was like, well, he's not even someone I considered, I'm okay with it. So it really depends on how I arrived at my decisions, which is why I think it's so important to make sure you're making the calls for you and not because of something else, because it's about managing yourself as well as your team. And I think like last season there was a bad one where I didn't get on Son and Kane, and I think it was the West Ham game where they just ripped West Ham apart in the first 20 minutes. I really struggled to get over that, because obviously there were people wildcarding that week to get Son and Kane in, and I'd thought about it, but you just didn't do it. And then I absolutely kicked myself afterwards and was like, why didn't I see it? Why didn't I go for that? So it really depends on the decision process and how you got there. But most of the time, I even in a bad game week, I'll be like, oh, that's okay. It didn't go my way, but I was happy with what I decided, and I've already picked my team for next game week, and that sometimes helps when you look forward and go, right, I'm not going to spend too much time looking back because it wasn't my fault. It was just variance.
General, do you struggle? You talk a lot about psychology.
I think if I went back 4 or 5 years ago, it's something I struggled with. It would affect me way more than it should have. But I've had to kind of train myself to not let it impact me as much as it used to. So I would be lying if I said if things don't go well for me on Saturday, I'm fine. I'll just forget about it. But what I'm much better at now is letting it annoy me for 10 or 15 minutes. After that final whistle, then click out of it, change perspective, go do something else, go for a walk, get Netflix on, anything, paint the bloody fence, anything but thinking about what's just happened during the day. It's, like Adam said, it's so important to deal with those bad game weeks or a bad run of game weeks because, like you say, I think I went on tilt myself last season. I had to plan a Wildcard 31 all along, 7 or 8 hours in a row. You know what? I'll go a week early and bang, blew up in my face. So, I deal with it much better than I used to. And I think it's one of the most important aspects of this game, because it's 9 months, it's grueling. And if you can deal with the bad weeks well, I always say the person who wins FPL will have a few bad game weeks. We all have them, but it's how you react to them. Little things as well. If you're on Twitter, don't disappear when you have a bad game week. If I score 19 points, you'll see me posting it and having a laugh about it because it makes me feel better and it makes everyone else feel better who've had a bad game week as well. Yeah. And it makes the guy feel better who got 90 points that week as well because you know what I mean? So, that's what I always say. Don't disappear when you have a bad game week.
I'd wager that Tom here is the least emotional out of all of us as an FPL manager. Is that true, Tom? Does it bother you, a bad game week?
Everyone's different and you have different ways of dealing with it. I find it quite hard to switch off. I get the advice to kind of go for a walk or spend time with your family. I find that quite difficult to do that. I find myself kind of lying in bed at night just thinking about it. So what I always find helps is to look forward and focus on the next game week. And so I'll go and have a rummage, when even if a game week's in the middle of happening, if you're having a bad one, but even just looking ahead to that next one, start looking at stats, start researching the next game week. And that kind of makes me feel better because you're not focusing as much on that. And you feel like you're getting prepared, and maybe while other people are celebrating a good week, it maybe just feels that you're kind of already preparing for the next. It's just little mental things like that. But when I'm having a bad game, I do find it very hard to switch off from it. I can't really forget about it. It kind of plays on your mind. So that's just one thing I do, which maybe makes me feel a bit more positive about the whole situation.
I wasn't expecting that. I'll be honest. I wasn't expecting that. I'd be like, I thought you'd be like, yeah, it's all right. Next morning, let's focus on doing what we're supposed to do. Zoff, you get affected?
Very similar to what Tom said. Sometimes I find it difficult, but I start looking forward then. Because ultimately the game week's gone. There's nothing you can do to change it. So I start planning forward. And to a certain extent, I keep telling myself that I had the best information while making the decision. I took the best decision I thought possible. So what happens ultimately is the outcome. There's variance at the end of it, right? So I usually console myself, there's variance.
Yeah, I've been talking to you for the best part of 6-7 years. I don't see you getting flustered at all. You brush it off very easily in comparison to everyone, in my opinion. Adam? You get affected?
I'd love to say it didn't affect me, but I'd be lying. I'm much better at dealing with it than I used to. I think a couple of years ago, it was. Do you know what? When I first come on Twitter, so probably the first 18 months, it hit me harder a bad game week than it ever had before, and I think it's probably because there was other like-minded people putting good scores in, and you've in my circle outside of before I was on Twitter, I was the best person. It's I think that had a bit of an impact. Now, to be honest, I've stopped doing things that. So I've stopped checking in-play scores and stuff like that, and I try and if I've had a bad game week, I will switch off for the game and do something else for, it depends how bad the game week is, but it might be a couple of days. And then early the following week, I'll just pick up as normal, but I feel like I've reset everything. So I'm much better than I was, but It's the same with Villa as well. Villa lose or play badly or anything, it affects me equally. So there's a couple of things. So the ultimate is Villa win and have a good week in Green Hour and FPL ultimate weekends. But there were a lot of times last year, particularly where it was a red arrow and not a Villa win.
Yeah. Those are not easy to deal with. All right, let's get a little bit into the nitty-gritties of the game. And I want to talk about preseason. How is it that you arrive at your Game Week 1 team? Are you a heavy tinkerer, or do you just collect as much information as possible and then tinker light in the last week? How do you arrive to that decision? Tom, I'll come to you first.
I tend to do a bit of both. I will have a bit of a tinker, but even the developments over the past couple of days with kind of Grealish and Ings and stuff like that. I mean, all of you're seeing drafts being ripped up left, right, and centre, and so I don't tend to spend too much time on it. But I do start getting structures in place and players I'm considering. I mean, what I do is I spend a lot of time researching the newly promoted clubs, which was a bit easier a few years ago when Villa were in the Championship, because I suddenly had so much knowledge of all the teams around that were coming up there. Now you have to put a little bit more work into it, but I do find that pays off. I mean, mentioned earlier, we started Bamford and Ayling last year. I think the year before I went with Henderson and Lundstram from Sheffield United. I do find getting that knowledge in place, even if you don't want to start with them, just getting that knowledge in place so you can move is a really helpful thing to do. And that newly promoted thing as well. I see a lot of people preach the wait and see approach, but I'm kind of don't agree with that. I think it's often too late. What you want these players for is you want that initial first game in front of the fans. You want to catch that momentum. And I'm not saying go and get a team full of newly promoted players. You've got to be very careful on who you pick. If you know what to look out for, I think that can really pay off in pre-season. But when we're getting to the point now where I am starting to kind of build drafts and kind of get that all in place now, but I don't go too early with that. So
follow-up question, Tom. Tony in your team?
Yeah, 100%. He hasn't left it actually. Yeah.
I'll come to you next, Mark. You mentioned you tend to struggle. Your strength was the second half of the season. How do you deal with Game Week 1? How do you arrive at your team?
I like pre-season, but I'm very mindful of giving myself a rest. I mean, when I did the Premier League stuff, it was exhausting, right? Because pre-season starts the minute the last season's finished, basically, and you're already kind of preparing content and you're already thinking about how you're going to present the pre-season. That was the case when I was at Scout as well. So now, since I'm away from that, and I just do content pre-season, and with the Euros, I was really strict with myself. I'm not going to play the Euro game. And then when FPL launched early, I was like, no, I need more time. And I think that's something I've learned. I think you've got to be disciplined and not start thinking about it early, because it's 9 months and it can be difficult. It is easier when you're doing well, but I've had bad seasons and it does take it out of you, and it's grueling, and you're dedicated, aren't you? All of us are dedicated. So I'm strict with when I start thinking about it. It's normally about now, 2 weeks before the start of the season, it really starts to excite me, and also I'm engaged a lot. I always like looking at pre-season friendlies and look at who's had the most pre-season weeks of training, because I think there's something in that. I like to think I can spot one or two things that then go into my decision making in Game Week 1. So I try and find one or two things like that, and I always take one or two risks with players. Last year it was Pulisic and Werner, I guess, to some extent, and so I'll probably have one or two of those in there. So I'm probably about now selecting where those risks are going to go, and how I'm going to do it. So I enjoy this period from about 2 weeks in, but I'm very strict about when that starts now.
I know you're contemplating going without Bruno at the start of this season, but generally those risks, are they in the mid-price bracket, or you're happy to take a risk in the premium spots as well?
Yeah, the risk will be around it'll be around like the Mahrez, Son, Jota, Grealish, Barnes, around there. So it's above the 6.5, above the 6 million mark. So otherwise you just go Bruno and get a couple of 6.5s, don't you? Right. So if you're going to go without Bruno, you've got to use that money, I think, on midfielders who are going to make a difference. So that's probably what I'll do.
Adam, how do you arrive at your Game Week 1 team? What's the process? Too much tinkering or too much information?
No, not at all. So I think in the past I have, and maybe when the game's been launched later, there has been a bit more tinkering. But I think this season in particular, really relaxed. What I've done, I reckon I've got probably 7 or 8 players that are based on what we know at the moment are nailed in my team. So my only decision really is those last 3. I think actually, so I've got 2 playing spots and a sub spot, depending on what formation I go for. So I'm quite relaxed about it. I think for me, I don't see it as such a big deal. You game week 1 team as because you know the least amount of information. You're going to get stuff wrong. A lot of it is guesswork. So just have a structure where you can be flexible, and I'll be happy to if I have to wildcard after 3 game weeks. I've done it before, and I think one of my mistakes I made last season. And I know from our chats, you know, you guys went quite early with the wildcard, which is my natural playing style, is to go anywhere between after 3 or 4 game weeks where you've got some data and you can get on the value players up to about game week 8. But because of Ben Crellin's promise that game week 16 would turn out to be the best ever time in the world to wildcard, and then obviously everything that happened with COVID and matches that got rearranged, it just ruined my season. So
it went well, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it's just about having a structure that I can be flexible on, and trying to cover the key price points so that I can quickly adapt. Because I think, you know, if you look at it this season, you've got Kane and Lukaku, which could be 2 big hitters that could come in. And that's why I think Bruno's quite key to own, because it's easier to you can do it in 2 transfers then to go for a striker. If your funds are spread out a little bit more, it just makes it difficult. Now, I'm not saying I think Son, Mahrez and all those could be great picks, but I think you lose a little bit of flexibility at the start of the season. That's my view on it at the the Obviously,
primary focus pre-game week 1 is the structure and the flexibility.
Structure and flexibility. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I've heard General's podcast and he talks about structure and flexibility as well. And he's also fairly relaxed pre-game week 1. Is the assumption correct?
Yeah, I'm probably more relaxed than I've ever been going into game week 1. Like I was saying before we start recording, maybe I'm too relaxed. It could be a bit of a panic last couple of days. It's creeping up quicker than I expected. But yeah, for me, pre-season is very little tinkering. I've probably been on the FPL website 3 or 4 times. I'm not someone who has a camera roll of 25 team screenshots. I've got 0 screenshots in my phone. It's just very much when I'm on the website, I'll have a little play around and I'll get off there again. And it's not really until final week is when I really knuckle down and start spending more time on the website. You know, the weekend before season starts, I'm actually going away Friday till Monday, and that's deliberate, to switch off for a couple of days, no FPL thoughts whatsoever, no laptop, and then come back Monday evening and into Tuesday, and that's when I'll really start ahead of Friday's deadline, because I just don't want to overdo it. And like Adam said, it's not really about individual player picks for me in game week 1. It's structure, it's price points. I always, you know, we've got 0 information really. If we're looking at it as a blank canvas, we don't know what's going to happen. You know, my game week 1 team could be 100k after 2 game weeks, or it could be 5 million. And it's all about what you do from there on afterwards. And like I said, I've tended to use my first wildcard quite late the last couple of seasons. But from the information we have right now, I can see myself going much, much earlier this season. So that kind of takes the pressure off as well with your game week 1 team. If you're open to the early wildcard, you don't have to get it right.
How many game weeks are you looking at when you're building your game week 1 team, General?
This season, not as many as usual, because I think there's quite a few unknowns, quite a lot of new managers as well. So I tend to avoid those teams with a new manager. So I'm probably only looking at the first 3 or 4 at the moment, whereas maybe previously, you know, when we didn't have a summer tournament and things were a lot more stable, you know, I'd probably look at 7 or 8 game weeks.
Zoff, what about you?
So
I was surprised when you told me you tinker too much, because I wasn't expecting that.
I was a bit disappointed to hear General say that he doesn't have any screenshots saved. I was expecting all identical answers you're getting so far. So
we'll have to do something different,
right? So yeah, we have to have people believe that we are different people. So we have to do some things different at least. So yeah. So what I usually do, I see some information, I tinker, I save the screenshot, then go back to it. I don't necessarily make the transfers in the draft, but as soon as I see some information, I usually whip it out, have a tinker, save the screenshot, go back. But like a lot of the guys said, it's a lot about structure. That structure is important, flexibility.
Yeah. I'm a little worried for General right now because while listening to him, there was a lot of deja vu because I was very relaxed at the start of last season. I went out of town in the first weekend and then I didn't have Salah game week 1. So just make sure you have Salah in your team game week 1. That's my
no
advice.
matter what, no matter how good this weekend away is, Salah will still be there. Don't worry.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's not going to make that mistake.
Yeah, just don't make that mistake. All right, just out of curiosity, a little bit of a rapid fire. How many screenshots are there on your phone or your PC? Tinker screenshots, Adam?
0.
0. General?
Yeah, 0 or maybe just 1. It's just the current one.
I've got 3 or 4 at the moment. Tom?
Got a few.
5 or 6. On, give us a number. Give us a
5 or 6. 5 or 6, I'd say.
7 or 10, you reckon, Tom?
10, 15, maybe.
Every time you ask, it goes up a bit.
It's my job now. Come on.
Soft 20 plus
I think,
at the moment, maybe?
I think more than 3-4 times everybody combined. So I'd rather not
Love it.
Nice.
Love it.
Nice. And Mark, what about you?
I'm just looking in the WhatsApp channel with Az and Luke, and I've seen 6. So that's probably a pretty good record. So every time I make a team, I go, what do you make to this? And so I reckon 5 or 6. Healthy, nice. I think that's all right.
Yeah, that's good. I think you need to be aware of some of the structures. So let's get into the key factors in your decision-making process, and let's not talk about the start of the season, but let's talk game week 12, mid-game week. What are the factors that affect your decision-making process? What are the practices that you have in place as a manager? What do you do on a Saturday, Sunday? What do you do on a Monday? I'll come to you first, Tom.
On a Monday, I'll tend to kind of spend a good kind of half hour, 45 minutes looking at all the data from the weekend, going through the individual matchups.
How many games have you seen before a Monday morning, Tom?
How many games do I watch?
Yeah.
It varies. I mean, I've got quite a young family, so I tend to watch games back if I'm not around at the time. I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4 games over a weekend and then highlights and things like that. So looking at the data is quite important if you can't watch everything. And well, even if you do watch the games, it's good to back it up anyway, by looking at it. And I tend to do that and, look at all the obvious things, but also stuff like touch maps and heat maps and stuff like that, player positioning, that kind of thing. Certain things stand out, even things like who's on corners and all that, and just have a little kind of look around. So that's always what I do on a Monday. And obviously now doing the job that I do, that's probably just going to carry on into most days, to be honest. But I've always liked doing that because it, little things stand out that maybe other people don't see who aren't doing that. So.
More often than not, I'm betting you know what you're going to be doing on Saturday come Monday, because you said you're quite a bit of a planner. Is that the case in most? Yeah, but then sometimes you see things, or you watch a game and you notice something where you think you might see a weakness in a defence or something like that, and that kind of makes you think about other things. But yeah, I think going back to that planning point, it's a good idea to have an idea what you want to do. But at the same time, I wouldn't be so rigid where I'd say that's definitely what I'm going to do. I can change. I do change my mind quite often. So. Adam? Weekly practices that work in your favor.
Yeah, a few things. So when I watch matches, I'm quite good now at predicting the stats. So like if I watch a game, I could tell you how many big chances any players had. I could get the XG within I could probably, I would say one decimal place and stuff like that. So I'm getting quite good at that. And what's really good, it's a bit geeky, I know, but what's really good is SofaScore and FootMob now. You've got the XG on there, so you can get the in-play XG. Yeah. So I'm a bit of a geek with stats and data, and I will look at it at the end of a game week. But I've already got an appreciation, because if I'm watching a game, I'll check it at half time, I'll check it in play. So I do that quite a bit. The other two things that I do is, as I've got older, I enjoy Match of the Day more. I had a spell where I didn't watch it for a few years, and I'd probably watch more of the games, but I started watching Match of the Day and consistently. So I get to see pretty much most of the games, and I will watch as much football as I can do. Like Tom, you've got young children, and sometimes you have to spend time with them and do parent duties and all of that. So, and then the third thing is that I do religiously and this comes to the open mind side of things, is I write down as many options as I can think of at the start of the week, and I try not to rule out anything from a transfers. So often it will usually be, I would say, up to 7 or 8 options about things that I can do. And it often, I categorize it: no hits, obviously saver transfers, the top one, no hits, up to usually a -8 if applicable. Obviously, if my team's looking good, there won't be any minus things. And I've got a whiteboard now in my office. I just have it written up there, and I just so that, and occasionally towards the end of the week you'll rule out an option because a player will be injured or you'll read some stuff, but I just try and keep open-minded on those options, and then towards the end of the week work out, are there any that I can rule out, which are the best ones. So they're probably the things that I do consistently.
Do you have a plan in place? Like Tom, do you know what you're likely going to be doing on a Monday or a Tuesday when you're making a transfer, or it's
no? I try not to, because I just try to write as all of the options within reason that I can think of, and just try and absorb the data and the information throughout the week, and then make the decision. Because I just think sometimes at the start of the season I'll go aggressive and go early. Actually, I probably should say that, particularly for price rises, and I'll take more gambles. But I think when you've gone past game week 8 or 9 and you've got European football consistently and you've got more data, at that point I'm more likely to wait till after 10:30 on a Friday. So yeah, that for me, it's just about writing down all the options and try not to rule anything out, and try and get rid of the biases, and just make the decision towards the end of the week.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm not much of a planner when it comes to FPL. My decisions are mainly spontaneous after watching football on Saturday or Sunday. More often than not, I'm making my moves on a Sunday night or even a Monday night, because my ideas are sometimes so ridiculous. I don't want anybody else talking me out of them. So I just back myself and go ahead with that. I'll come to you, Mark. Any practices?
Yeah, I think I'm different from Adam on this one. I think I try to divorce stats and the eye test as much as possible. So I'll try and spend the weekend watching football, and it won't. The only time I look at data on a Saturday is if I'll check the price rises, and if there's a player that is going up, I'll double check that's not a player I should take notice of, and I might then dip into data then. But if it's a player that I'm not bothered about, or a player I've got, then I won't look at data, and probably till Sunday night when most of the matches have been played, because I find it's then easier to separate my feelings about players based on the eye test and my feelings about players based on the data. Whereas if I combine the two, I'm kind of mixed messages kind of thing. And also I like to see whether the data reveals anything which I didn't see having watched the matches, because then you learn about when I watch a match, what am I missing? Because the data shows this and I didn't even notice that. So I like to kind of get better at the eye test by looking at data afterwards and training yourself in that way a bit. But then go on.
When you're looking at that data on a Monday, it's with an open mind. It's not using the data to validate what your eye test is telling you.
That's what you got to be worried about, is that you're going in with confirmation bias. So you've got to be aware of that, of course. I try not to. I try and stay open-minded. But it's very easy to watch a match and go, I've got to get that player in. And it's happened a few times. And then you look at the data and go, right, where's the data that's going to reinforce that I can make this early transfer? So you just got to be aware of that. But yeah, I try and use Sunday evening as the time when I look at data, because I'm used to using Sunday evening to prepare for the content that I'm going to do that week, right? I did it for a job, so that's what I used to do. I used to not do any Saturday night, do it Sunday night. So I've just kept that up, really. So I'm starting to think about Black Box Sunday night, about what we're going to talk about. So that works well that's when I look at the data. And then, by Monday, if I haven't made my transfer already, if I haven't gone early, I'll start. Yeah, from that point on, it's all about the transfer I'm going to make that week, and that'll either go all the way up till Saturday morning, or most often than not, I make it Friday or Thursday night.
Tell me, if there isn't convincing enough data when it comes to a pick you've really liked that you watched over the weekend, will you still pull the trigger, or you need the data to validate it?
I don't need the data, but I often like to have that. And the other thing that I'll do is I'll look at fan forums and local press reports and stuff like that. I'll look at opinion on that player. There's a lot of variables go into it. I very rarely pick a player based on just one variable. Like I won't go, like the eye test tells me that player, I'm going to go with it, or data does. It has to be a combination before I'm kind of happy. I have to build a case in my head, and that case is stronger the more variables are pointing you towards that player. So that's what I tend to do.
I think that's a little different for general, because you call yourself more of an eye test manager. You like relying on that as well. I know you listen to and watch the recordings of games on Monday and Tuesday after watching MOTD on weekends as well. So what's your process like?
Yeah, I've always been very much eye test first. I just trust my own eyes to watch the game. I know you can miss things and see things you want to see, but if you're sensible about it and you do look at the numbers, I don't look at the numbers as much as other managers, but I always like that little fact check. Like Mark said, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing, or am I missing things as well that I don't want to see? So very often my week it's Monday to Friday FPL. So when it comes to deadline, whether it be Friday evening or Saturday morning, very often first thing I do is phone off. And my phone sometimes can be off all day Saturday, all day Sunday. People think I'm strange. I was even at a wedding just last week, Saturday and Sunday. And a couple of times people asked me things to show me a picture, and I went for my pocket and I didn't have my phone with me. I'm one of these strange people who like to have no technology when I'm at something. So
I think it's
sometimes I'll watch the early kickoff on Saturday and then switch off for the day. Likewise, Sunday I might watch one game and switch off for the other 2 or 3. And I much prefer watching games after the fact. So my wife's a teacher, so we make the most of our weekends. And then when she's at work on Monday, it's very much Monday's my day for catching up. I've recorded all the games. I always try and watch every game that's televised. I didn't do it last season because they were all televised, but in a normal season, we usually get 5 games in the UK. So I'll watch 5 of them. So maybe one Saturday, one Sunday, and then the other 3 will be on Monday. And then have a look at the numbers after I watch them. Tuesday then is podcast day, so recording a podcast. And like Adam said, I'll always include at the end of the podcast maybe 2, 3, 4 options that I'm thinking about for transfers. Or even if I know what I'm doing, I'll still add in 2 or 3 more just to open up those possibilities. Wednesday is a day off. As much as I try to take a day off on a Wednesday, because if you're full-time FPL, even if you're doing Match of the Day Challenge Saturday, Sunday, it's very hard to switch off. You're still thinking about it. So I try to take a day off on a Wednesday. Thursday, again, it's more of a content day. I'm writing for The Athletic, but in the back of my mind, the wheels are turning. I'm starting to think about what I'm going to do. And then Friday's very much back to my team then, talking to subscribers and, bouncing ideas. And then it comes to Friday evening and everything goes off again. And it's just me, the FPL website. I go back to Monday and I'll have noted down on Monday what my initial thoughts were for transfers. Go see if it's the same, if it's different, ask myself why, and then just come to a decision on Friday night. I'll always make my moves on a Friday night, even if it's a Saturday morning deadline, because there's something about it. I don't like being on the website close to deadline, because I think that's another trap you can fall into. Those transfers in the last hour or the last 15 minutes. Quite often those are bad decisions.
I quite like that you move into a Friday with a different idea, that more often than not with a different idea than what you had on the Monday, because it's something I struggle with, and that's first idea bias. Because if there's something that's in my head on a Sunday or a Monday, I find it very difficult to change my mind, because it's something that I've caught on while watching the game. So it's something I'm willing to improve upon, or hoping to improve upon. So I'll come to you. Practices for you?
So for me, I think like General just said, what I want to do on a Friday is completely different from what I want to do on the Saturday, right? So I need some convincing as to what I wanted to do on Saturday is what I should do. And for me, having a core group around me is very important. You're one of the guys I bounce ideas off, and a couple of other people. So they know my thought processes, they know my biases, they know maybe I want to buy this player maybe because he's a Chelsea player, maybe because I like certain attributes of his play. So it's not really a subjective decision. They sort of bring me back that this is your natural game. This is what you probably should be doing. So that helps for me.
You mentioned, bouncing ideas off. That's something I wanted to touch upon. Mark, I know you bounce ideas off with Az and Luke, and that's your little FPL ecosystem. Anybody else you talk to or let influence you when it comes to your FPL decisions? No. And how often do you?
No, I'll go on Twitter but I won't ask people on Twitter an opinion. I'll read what is being said on there, but I won't ask opinion outside of Az and Luke, really. And then they give me more than enough feedback, so it's fine.
Who's changed your mind more, Az or Luke?
Az changes my mind quite a lot. Yeah, I think Luke is like the extreme version of me, and Az is a bit the other way. So I think it works really nice. Yeah. I think there's a nice balance there.
Yeah, you need people with different perspectives. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, actually, it's something a little different for me, because I wish I soundboarded with slightly more aggressive players, because I need that little bit of a I just need that little bit more validation, and it's just, I mean, I used to talk to Champ a lot, who was a manager on the FFS boards, and Epic Fail and RCA, they're very similar managers when it comes to the style that I have, and I quite like that they are approving this, and and they filtered out the really bad ideas, and they're okay with an aggressive play style. So I quite like discussing and bouncing ideas of such managers. What about you, Adam? Are you a lone decision maker, or you're discussing your ideas with other people?
I think. Yeah, we're part of a few groups, aren't we? So there will be times that I will share ideas and put things out there, and I think I have put things on Twitter. I'll obviously send my team to Fergie and speak to him about it on a podcast. So there is that, and but I don't like too many influences, because I want it to be my decision. And one of the things that I think sometimes distract, when you go on Twitter or other forums and there's loads of different teams on there, I don't find that helpful. Some people probably do, but the thing that it never shows you is the starting point that team's at. They're all at a different starting point to you. So I prefer it to be my own decision, and I think having a couple of close sources is great. I think having too many, so like Mark mentioned, having Az and Luke, I think that's good. But when you get too many opinions, it just clouds your judgment. And I also think as well, there's confirmation bias. I've seen this over the years, where you ask loads of people, and then as soon as somebody says, yeah, that's a great idea, that carries a lot more weight than the 10 people that said, no, don't do that. Or you can proactively search people that are confirming your bias. So I think a small number's good, but I'm sure there's other people that can cope with loads and loads of different influences, but I find that difficult personally.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think a close group of people who know you and you know them, I think that's what works best. General, do you bounce ideas off anybody?
This is an interesting one for me, actually. I hadn't really thought about it, but I'm very much a lone wolf, I think, when it comes to decision making. I think one of the positives of being the only person on your podcast is you don't have those little WhatsApp groups that can influence you too much. So I deliberately as well stay away from WhatsApp group chats and Twitter DM group chats. I think it was beginning of last season, I just deliberately removed myself from all of them, because I don't want too much influence, because I think what I'm most prone to is listening to people like yourselves, managers who've got really, really good records. What you guys say carries more weight than others. And I was in a couple of groups with a lot of very good managers, and I just could, feel it influence me more than I liked. So I just don't do them anymore. But also my biggest challenge in the work that I do is probably that I do WhatsApp 1-to-1 with managers. So maybe 40 or 50 managers, and I'm doing that all day Friday. And then I have to sit down myself and make my own decision. And I remember my first year of Patreon my rank was 500k, and that's no coincidence. It's because I was overdoing it. I was spending too much time looking at other people's teams, and I've cut those numbers way back. I continue to cut those numbers back every season in terms of the 1-to-1. But what I've learned to do quite well is when I am discussing someone's team with them, I very much put my own team out of my head, and I don't even kind of compare or think about my own team until the evening time. And it's the same with a forum, like a Slack channel. Maybe 200 or 300 people on there, so it's quite active. There's a lot of chatter. But I deliberately on a Friday, once it comes to 5 o'clock on a Friday, you won't see me on the Slack channel for 4 or 5 hours until I've made my decision. Maybe I'll jump on late at night then, or first thing in the morning. But yeah, it's doing FPL full time. It comes with a lot of its own challenges in terms of making your own decision.
So those 4 or 5 hours that you're taking on a Friday while you're decision making, are you on Twitter at all, or just stats, data?
I'm trying as much. It's probably actually not 4 or 5 hours. When it comes to sitting down with my team, it's probably an hour, 2 hours max. And I mean, you've done the research all week anyway. You've watched all the games. You kind of have an idea what you're doing. But I always do just switch, Twitter's off, Slack's off, WhatsApp's off. There's no podcast in the background. There's no article tabs open. It's very much sitting down, tunnel vision. What do I want to do? And just giving yourself that little bit of extra time rather than just really quickly pressing transfer in, done. And that's what I try and do on a Friday evening.
Tom, what about you, Lone Wolf? I mean, we're a part of the same WhatsApp group, and more often than not, it's often me asking questions. You're asking questions maybe once in 15 game weeks, if I had to say something.
I guess that says it all. Yeah, no, I tend to make my own decisions. I think there's so much there's too much context and too many factors in your own team. I think sometimes to put questions out there, there's so much that goes into it in terms of chip strategy, forthcoming plans, which only you're aware of. So I find it very hard to kind of put it out there. And I've always been that way, really. And that's why, you get asked so many questions on Twitter on deadline day and things like that. And I find them very hard to answer because you haven't got the full context of that team. And I used to try and reply to everything. And it just got to the point where I felt bad for answering like a question within a 20 seconds kind of thing when I don't know what the guy's got planned 2 weeks, or the girl or whatever, 2 weeks down the line. So it's very difficult to give advice and even ask for advice on your own team because it's essentially you that knows what's going to happen with it. So I tend to just do it myself, to be honest.
I've seen you on the FFS boards for years and you're always very helpful answering everybody's. But I think, Tom, that comes with the kind of manager you are, because nobody has a far long-term plan as much as probably you do. Everybody else is, like Adam and I, we have a fresh slate once the Saturday deadline hits. So it's probably...
Maybe, but I'm sure Mark last year, on Black Books, you put up some rough planners, didn't you, for probably 6 game weeks, something like that, was it?
It's the first time I've done that, though, last year. So I'm going to do it. This season I'm doing it, and it's the first time I've done it at the start. I've never used a transfer planner before.
Really?
So
Okay.
it's interesting to try it out and see. It didn't do me any harm last season. I think it helped me in the last few 8 or 9 game weeks, which is when I used it. So, yeah.
All right. Next question is an interesting one, and I want to ask all of you. Do you play differently when you're in the top 100K, the top 10K, and the top 1K? I'll come to you first, Mark.
I don't think I do, but you probably do, without realising it. I think. I often said to Az that momentum is a thing. Like if you're off the back of 3 or 4 green arrows, you are perhaps more buoyant, and if you are a risk taker, you're more likely to go with your gut or go with risks, right? And I think that's definitely true of me. I definitely feel like I get some momentum if I've had 3 or 4 good game weeks, and equally if I have 3 or 4 bad game weeks, I'll probably take fewer risks. So I guess by that very nature, if you're in the top 100K, I would probably be pushing a bit more at that point. Whereas if I was doing badly, I would perhaps play conservatively for longer and try and time the risks a bit better. I don't know. It's difficult to say. I don't think you notice it very much. I think if you're on the verge of the top 10K and you've got 2 or 3 game weeks to go, I think you adapt then, because then you've got to decide, right, do I just want to get in the top 10K and go with that, or do I want to try and push the top 1K? And that will change your strategy. And I've had that a couple of times where I've just gone for it in the final game week and dropped away massively, because for me it's like, well, I'm either finishing in the top 1K or I'm finishing somewhere in the top 10K, and it doesn't really matter to me. I might as well go for it. But outside of that, I don't think I adapt too much, other than with the momentum and confidence thing.
All right. I'll come to you, General. Do you play differently when you're high up there?
I think I play pretty similarly no matter where I am in the rankings. I think back to that really bad season that I had. I think I finished over 500K a couple of years ago. And I remember being at a point, maybe game week 27, 28, where I had a decision to make. Do I just keep plodding along, doing what wasn't really working, which is my usual play style, or do I become late riser for the last 10 game weeks and just find those differentials and go for it? And I remember just sticking to the usual play style. It didn't really work. But I think, I'm trying to think what I would do if I was in the same scenario. But it's, again, like I say, it just doesn't suit me to really go for it and go for broke. But again, if you're 500K with 5 weeks to go, obviously you're going to go for it then. I had a bit of a longer spell, so I thought maybe I could chip it away at it over 11 or 12 game weeks or whatever. But yeah, I tend to, things don't change for me too much, whether I'm 1K or 1 million.
Interesting. So things don't change for you. Mark is more momentum driven than position driven. Adam, you?
I think there's always the subconscious element of it. So I don't think there's any deliberate way of playing differently. So I don't think I do that. But I don't think that the rank has a big impact. I think it's the momentum that over the years has had an impact. So if I've had a red arrow, or I've had, if I'm on the back of 3 or 4 green arrows, I might play with more confidence and be a bit more confident in my decision making than if I've had 4 red arrows. So I think that's a bigger factor than the overall rank I'm at. I think obviously if you're going into the last couple of weeks of the season, you've got a mini league rival, you've got a thing, then you might take, I might be likely to do a couple of punty captains and things like that. But on the grand scheme of things, I don't deliberately try and change my style or do anything different because of rank.
Let's say it's game week 37 and you're ranked at 9522. Will you try to protect it?
Take that, Todd.
Would you be worried about the top 10K at that point and try to safeguard your position?
I think it's a really good question. So I think the end, when you're coming into the last couple of game weeks of the season, it depends what the goal is. And I think there's certain, there'll be certain benchmarks that you might want to achieve. So 10K, 1K, and obviously potentially a single digit rank. So I think if you're off after any of those things, yeah, of course you might. But to be honest, I wouldn't look at the ownership of players and people below me and all of that. I wouldn't go into that. I think if I got into that position, it'd be probably because I was picking quite good picks, and I just wouldn't do anything too maverick. But that's not my style anyway. I wouldn't go with an out there captain or anything like that. Obviously, if I was trying to get into it, if I was 11K and I wanted to get in the top 10K, I might go for the slightly differential captain.
Like a Mane over a Salah. Like last year we had 38
exactly.
is a good example.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good example.
Tom, do you play any differently?
Yeah, last season, I was playing catch-up in the second half of the season, and so I massively changed the way I play. I went with quite an unconventional wildcard time. Bench boost was a week later than most others played it. A bit like with Mane and Salah, I think I went Son over Kane 1 or 2 occasions. So, I will be honest, it doesn't really suit my play style playing catch-up. It's not really my game, making those kind of decisions. And people were coming to me on Twitter and they were like, why are you doing this? It was because I'm playing catch-up. I wouldn't normally doing this if I was in the top 10K. It's a reaction to that. So, but if I'm, going back to that, if you're kind of 9,500 going into the last week, I'd be determined to change that bio on Twitter and get an additional 10K. So I would be kind of like very wary of that, I think. So, but it depends where you are. If you're 2K, like you say, you would probably make that push to try and get in the top 1K. So it's all about where you are, isn't it? But definitely if I'm chasing, I'll change the way I play.
Yeah, it doesn't suit me either playing catch up, because you tend to try too hard and then you end up making moves that make no sense at all. So there's a fine line in terms of being able to trust yourself when you're trying to do something different, because sometimes you're just doing something different for the sake of
it. Definitely don't do it too early either. If you're behind in December, don't change the way you play. But for me, it was getting to call into April time, so that's the time when you have to act. But certainly don't do it if you're struggling around Christmas. There's plenty of time to turn it around.
Yeah, I think Matthew MJ was a great example of that. He was struggling for most part of last season. He was around where I was, around the 2 million, 3 million mark, game week 18. And then he just made steady, no mistake moves and grafted his way into a top 100K, 50K sort of finish. So I thought that was great. Zoff, you?
Very similar. I know only one way to play very process-oriented grafted. I can't look at a player and go, oh, he's low ownership, I should pick him. Ultimately, I pick the players I want to pick because I think they're going to score points, whether they're low ownership or not. Like, if you're giving me a choice between a Salah and a Mane, I'll always go with Salah. Even though, it happened to me, in fact, game week 38 last year, I was at 9K. I had the choice whether do I go for Mane or do I go for Salah? Do I try to push further? Or do I try to maintain rank? I went for Salah and I fell to 15k. So it has its effects.
That it comes down to goals, and I think Mark, FPL General, tweeted it early this season where he said that his goal is to now win FPL and not think about top 10k. What's your, let's call it, FPL career goal, and does that influence the way you want to play as of now?
Yeah, I think probably last season more than ever before, I felt more, of a pressure to get this top 10k that somebody somewhere years ago decided that's what we all needed to do. And it's really caught on, and that's what, most people, it's been mentioned a few times in this podcast already. People aim for that. That seems to be the benchmark as an excellent season. But I find myself maybe ranked about 1k at one point last season, before the halfway mark. And then when things started to slide for me in the second half of the season, I felt it really annoying me. Because I knew I was slipping outside the top 10k. I knew I probably wasn't going to get back there. So that was I'd failed on my goal. And I just feel like, I think especially as a content creator as well, I think a lot of us probably put too much pressure on ourselves to do well. And what I'm trying to change my mindset to, content number one, FPL rank number two. So, I mean, as long as your advice is good and as long as your content is good and consistent and it's helping other people, it doesn't matter that much how your own team does, because, I mean, you've got so much pressure on yourself to do well with everything that's going on anyway. I was laughing about Tom there, talking about his bio to add the extra, top 10k finish in there. I'm actually thinking about removing mine now. I think mine says 3 top 500 finishes. I might change it to future FPL champion. I think it's got a nicer ring to it. So I always say as well, I mean, I'm doing FPL full time. I hope I'm going to be doing FPL full time for the foreseeable future. I'm 30 years old, so I would say one of my subscribers is 84 years old, and he's finished in the top 10k a couple of times recently. So that gives me another 50 odd years to win this bloody thing.
That's nice. It's fascinating. I think you should make that change in the bio for sure.
Future, I might lose a few followers over that one.
Yeah, I think my goal is that there's a few people that the guys to podcast with Andy Green finished third once. Backer finished fourth, didn't he? I would like to have one season where I've got a chance at some point in the season of going number one, or going on to winning it, and just having that opportunity and experience. I think of all of the fantasy games, FPL is the hardest to win because of the number of people. So I play Sky, I play Fan Team, I play others, and I think there's Fergie won Dream Team, didn't he? I think there's other fantasy games where people from the community who are very, very committed have got a genuine chance of winning it. It's no more than Sky. Sky, usually a good committed manager wins it. FPL, I think there's so much variance. And I mean, the biggest thing for me is that the last few seasons has been VAR and the borderline offside decisions that have ruled in or ruled out goals. And I think it's those sort of things that have such a big, big impact. So I think you need a lot of luck to put yourself in a position. But I just want one season where hopefully I have a good start. But at some point in the season, I think, do you know what? I've got a genuine shot of winning this. If I mess it up, I'm not even bothered. I just want to have that experience. I mean, you finished, is it top? What's your best late riser? 29th?
30th.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you ever had, when you were with 30, if there was ever a point in the season where you thought, do you know what? I have a chance of winning it.
Yep. I was fourth going into game week 38. I remember the season in 2011. I went for a differential captain, but ended up 17th. But absolutely no regrets, right? When you're in that position, you have to go for it.
Not.
Was that the season, Zoff, when you were talking about it, I was just remembering Zoff, because was that the season, Zoff, you weren't outside the top 100 throughout the season?
Yeah.
From game week 1 to 38. Imagine such a season. He's had such a season. But he's not moved outside the top 100 throughout the whole season. That's so much.
It was only about 102 players then, though, wasn't it?
But yeah, Adam, that wasn't the closest, the 30th I was. The season I finished 189th, actually. I was 21st to 22nd, around the game week 35 mark, and I went full anti-template in an attempt to win it and finished 189th. But like Zoff said, no regrets. Have to go for it. And actually, when it comes to career goals, I think just because conveniently I've finished in the top 100 twice, there's a narrative where I can just aim for that hat trick of top 100 finishes, and it sort of suits my playstyle as well. So I'm just happy to not carry the load of the top 10k and let you guys do that. Mark, what about you?
Yeah, I'm like Adam. I've never had a season where I've got any kind of thoughts about winning it at all. I always kind of grind my way up the ranks towards the end. And I've had good good low finishes, but always with a sprint finish, never with. A general was saying like, he was in the top 1,000, like at the halfway point when you mark, and I've never had that. Never.
I don't think I have either.
No, and so like if I was, I'd be I wouldn't be able to stop myself thinking, well, second half with the chips, you never know, right? Never had it, never in all those seasons had that situation. So I don't know how I'd react. I really don't. I think I would play differently. I think if that happened, but in a way, maybe it's good that it's never happened. And ending well with a sprint finish, you don't change your play style. You just kind of come through at the end, don't you? Manage to sneak in, but. I like Adam. I just for one season to see how I would react. Actually, it'd be pretty worrying because I think about it enough now. God, if I was actually thinking to myself, I've got a chance of winning it, how much it would probably ruin my life. But yeah,
last game week as well.
If you were 1,000 at Game Week 18, I bet you'd have a spreadsheet with all the 999 players ahead of you with their team.
I don't know, but I mean, I think 1,000. That's you've still got a lot of work to do, I guess. But if you're getting into the top 300 or 400 with 10 game weeks to go, you'd still be dreaming, wouldn't you? I think I would anyway. I'd be thinking I can pull this out, but I've never been there. So one season going there just to see what it'd do to me. Divorce probably was what happened.
You'd move into your shed full time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Tom, career goals, top 10k accumulator.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what General said, I do think that the top 10k is maybe a bit of an unhealthy target these days with 8 million people playing. I think something maybe around about top 50k would be considered a very good season, and then you just need 2 or 3 of those captaincy calls to really go your way to push on to a top 10k. So I do think, top 10k it's quite an unrealistic expectation now. But in terms of targets, don't know, a couple of years ago, I really wanted to top the Hall of Fame, and I got to number 2, I think in November 2019. But now I've kind of fallen back, and it's a pretty brutal target to have because one bad season and you're tumbling 100 places down. So a 6th top 1k would be brilliant. But again, it's one of those seasons which, they're not going to come around very often. Now, back in the day, it was a little bit easier then. And then I suppose just like the Great and the Good League, Elite 64, which General runs, they're all great leagues. They're really competitive, aren't they? They're always targets to kind of do well in each year. So, yeah, I think when you've been playing the game as long as we do, maybe you do need to set yourself little targets and challenges.
Right. Let's move into a little different ecosystem of FPL that's evolving quite a bit in the last 3 or 4 years, and that's the algo-focused FPL and analytical FPL. Do any of you guys use algos? I'll come to you first, General.
I have never, ever even looked at an algorithm.
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed.
I think I'm very old-fashioned and I'm very slow to move with the times, because I remember I was the same with expected stats at the beginning. I was very much, never used them before. Why should I use them now? But, slowly started to see what the benefits of using them are. So algorithms, probably similar process. Never used them before. I've done well playing fantasy before without them. So why start using them now?
Don't plan on getting involved at all either?
No, probably not. Again, I don't have any plans to get into it. So yeah, I'll leave this one to you guys.
I haven't used algos ever.
Not even the RMT tool ever to make a decision which defender to bench, which player to play.
Nope, but I plan on subscribing to FPL Review this season. I want to improve as a manager, and I want to see what it's about. And I follow a few people focused on algos at the FPL community, and I think it's worth checking it out. And eventually, when it comes to somebody winning FPL, and they talk about whether a bot can win FPL, whether a line of code can win FPL, and I think it needs to take into account the subjectivity of the short-term nature of FPL. So I think it's going to be somebody who sort of looks at the numbers very heavily, as well as is in tune with the short-term changes. One injury and the play style of a certain team changes, and a pick like Gundogan emerges. So it's somebody who needs to be on top of both, I reckon.
Because algorithms take time to adjust. I think,
but I
still reckon an algorithm could get consistently 100k, for example, or like a period of 5 years. I think 100k, 80k would probably still be achievable, but to see the finer details is probably where its limitations lie.
Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I've used them for years, and I kind of use all three that's out there at the moment. FPL Review, Rate My Team, Thematics, and I mean obviously Rate My Team arrived on Scout a long time ago, so I was introduced to them a long time ago. Chris Atkinson, who invented it, took me through it, and I kind of was intrigued by it. And I only use it as another variable, another voice. Really, I don't swear by it, and I don't let it have a massive swing on my decisions. I've never gone right, this is my transfer, and then checked an algo and gone, oh no, I'm going to do that instead. I just use it to sanity check, really, and I think they're really good for that. I think they're really useful for that, and useful for a bit of forward planning as well, but only as a sanity check. I can spot the kind of issues that there are in models. I can look at it and go, it hasn't got that short-term modelling, and there's little things that it will never know, like the team news aspect as well. It's very, very difficult to predict that. And a human being, like, we can watch team news and pick up on body language from a manager and go, right, that means he's not going to play him. A model's never going to be able to do that, right? And, so there's certain aspects of the human FPL manager that I don't think a model's going to get near to recreating and get. But I think using them to sanity check is worthwhile. And I think they've come on a lot. I think FPL Review is excellent. Rate My Team has always been good, but what's going on in the community now is staggering. It's interesting, right? I like watching what's going on from afar. I'm not clever enough to get involved in some of the levels that some people are, so I'm an admirer of it rather than someone who swears by it.
Do you think 10 years later it'll get close to giving you consistent top finishes? Once it was, because from what I've read, Premier League statistics and FPL is years behind American fantasy sport, where the kind of data that they look into is just years ahead of us. Do you think we'll get there later?
Yeah, I think a model will be out there that will be able to give you consistent high finishes, but I still think that there'll be seasoned managers who played it a long time who've still got the edge, because there's so many different things that feed into your decision making. I don't think a model will ever get there to that degree, but I think there'll be a model that can get you in the top 100k. Yeah.
Adam, do you use algos? Do you plan on using them?
Yeah, I use them, but I don't obsess with them. So I subscribe to what's his name, Mikhail's
transfer algorithm.
Yeah, so I get that, and I look at it, but I only spend like probably a minute or two looking at it just to see who's top, what transfers it's recommending. I do use Rate My Team, particularly. I tend to use Rate My Team more when I'm wildcarding, I think, and I use the Hub prediction tool. I use FPL Review as well, so I use all of them. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll compare them against each other for certain usually for player combinations. So maybe I'm into my last 3 or 4 players for my wildcard, and I'll look at how they compare and do averages of them and just see, does that mirror up to what I think, what the stats are saying. So yeah, I do use them, and I do find them helpful, but I don't think I'd ever go, well, the algorithms say this is going to be my decision. It's probably one of several factors. Obviously, if they're all agreeing, that's helpful. But I'll be honest, it's very unusual that they'll all agree on. If you were ranking 5 players, they might agree on one and 2, and then 3, 4, and 5 might be of a different order. So yeah, I think I use them, but then there'll be other factors that are be one of many factors.
Sorry, Adam. Yeah, it feels quite cold, doesn't it, and robotic if you're using it to make your decisions like that. And I remember you tweeted me at the start of last season, and you said, like, don't take the gut instincts out of what you're playing. And I think that's important, right? If you're that way inclined, if you do like to go with your gut sometimes and take risks sometimes, when you start using an algorithm, you've got to be careful that it doesn't transform you into a more robotic manager, right? Who's just going by numbers. I don't want to become that because it takes the joy out of it a little bit, I think, for me. So I think it's important that you use them well.
Agreed. Tom, do you use it at all?
Yeah, I mean, you were saying then, knowing when to react to the development of teams in shorter spells, it's maybe an issue with some algorithms, but it's also just in general for FPL managers, isn't it? Knowing if a team is the real deal or a player after 3 or 4 games, or if it is because of the fixtures or something like that, which have just made it like that. That's a challenge for everybody in what we play. But yeah, I do use them. Again, it won't define a decision that I make, but I like FPL Review. I like RMT. I like Mikhail Topram, like Adam. I think he's got the transfer algorithm, really interesting thing to look at each week, captaincy calls and all that kind of side. And then there's guys on Twitter, like Simon, FPL Kiwi, We Rogue. They do really good stuff. And I think if you want to evolve as a manager, you've got to try and embrace it a little bit and try and learn about it, and then just take on board elements which kind of suit what you want to do. But I definitely embrace it. I definitely use it for things like defenders and things like that, and working out, your bench order. I think they're really, really useful to get those opinions from them, and then you use them as you want to.
Yeah, so many factors just influence our decision making. It's important to maybe just have this one more, which is there's so much work gone into it. That's why I want to be open to it as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I'm aware we need to wrap up in about 10 odd minutes, so I'll just throw in one question from Twitter before we end. And this is from FPL Browser. And I think it's the only season-specific question that we're going to have on this chat. Every season is different. What do the panel predict to be the defining characteristics of this season? And how can you best set up for it? I'll come to you, Tom, first.
I guess this season, the whole home and away thing is going to be maybe much more relevant than it was last year, when it got to a point where I kind of disregarded it a little bit. I think well into the season, it didn't really play on my mind. It was more about the team, the opposition that are playing. So I think that would be something which we do need to take on board with the fans back in the stadiums, but also the offside rule, the penalty rules, which are, they're going to need monitoring in the first few weeks, because they're going to have a massive impact on the way we play the game. So the new rules, fans in the stadium, I think that's something which we're going to have to learn and kind of react to in the first few weeks, because maybe we're not going to see as many penalties as we did last year. Maybe we are. I don't know yet. So it depends how the referees are going to implement those new rules.
Zoff, you were talking?
Yeah, I was just saying, I think this season we're going to have a lot more choices. I think the big teams are getting really stronger. You have City who are strengthening, Chelsea who are strengthening, Liverpool who will have their fans back. So I think last season we mentioned on the pod, there were only 4 players who went over 200. I reckon they're going to be way more this season. You can probably have to hop on, hop off players a lot more. So
Yeah, I'm expecting that too, and I think it's going to suit the way I played the game as well. So it's very important to not take into consideration what happened last season, where we only had 3 or 4 premiums that delivered consistently week on week. I think that might change this season, and I think that's also going to be a defining characteristic of the season. General?
Yeah, a pretty boring answer, but I just think, going into any new season, trying to predict what the defining characteristics are going to be is almost impossible. I'm just hoping that when we get to Gameweek 38, that we're all saying, how great was it to have more of a normal FPL season, where your usual strategy worked well, your usual planning, there was no major hiccups, because I don't think any of us want to reflect on how disruptive last season was, and last season and a half. So yeah, it's hopefully it is just a lot more normal.
And have we covered everybody? Mark?
Yeah, I'm with General. You can't predict what's going to happen. I mean, it's every season is different and throws us different challenges. I just hope, like General says, we have a normal season in that respect, the one we're used to. I think one thing we haven't covered today was how hard was it, where the games were one after another, after another, after another. Oh, I mean, that was murder. Looking back on that, mentally that was difficult. And I think hopefully we noticed the difference this season by going back to like the 6 or 7 games at 3:00. I think that will help. So I'm looking forward to that. And like you said, Pranel, I want us to have more choices and more dilemmas and more decisions, because I think last season the template set up quite rigidly quite early, and I don't like seasons where the template is that really does wind me up, and things that actually reduce the variance a bit, I don't like it. Like the penalties thing last season, after 6 weeks I was like, oh my god, the whole season's going to be ruined because there's too many penalties, and you just get penalty takers, and luckily it didn't turn out like that. But anything which narrows the choices we've got, really I don't like. I like to have a wide landscape of lots of options, lots of choices, because it's just more enjoyable like that. So that's what I want.
Great.
We should get to the next question also, I think, because this is a really good one. Maybe we can get short answers, a differentiating skill.
All right, we'll throw one more in from Twitter. This is from Mike Duff. What is the differentiating skill in FPL? Is it the strategy in terms of price points, chips, planning transfers, reducing hits, not being emotional, etc.? Or is it understanding football and being able to predict where the points are going to come from? I'll come to you first, Adam, on this one.
I think we've all got different styles. I don't think there is one thing that is key there. I think there's just so many different factors. When we were talking about decision-making process, there's just so many different factors. And I think sometimes as well, luck and variance plays such a big part as well. And I think that makes things more extreme. I think you can you can consistently finish in the top 50k by making good decisions consistently, but then the extremeness of that finish, there's a lot of luck involved. So I think it's hard to put it down to any one thing. I just think that I think they're all important, and I think sometimes one thing that I find, we're always looking for this secret formula. Every season, you see it all the time. There's what is this secret formula? Oh, XG's come in, it must be XG, or that's the secret formula. There isn't a secret formula, and that's the beauty of FPL. It's the beauty of football. The fact that probably any team in the league can beat any team on one, any given day because of variance, because of luck. So I've given up looking for the secret formula, and I just enjoy and try and adapt to all of the situations that we get thrown.
Fair enough. I my answer would be, I think it would be a bit of both. You need to understand the strategy side of FPL, and I think all of us being FPL managers who've played this game for 7-8 years, I think that experience counts for something, because you do know how to handle a situation better than somebody who's playing the game for the first time, in terms of what a game week 10 throws us, what a random double game week that crops us 2 game weeks earlier throws up. We know how to handle those situations. But I think if it had to come about one of the other, I reckon somebody who understands strategy more has a better chance of doing well compared to somebody who understands football. I think if you know how to play the pieces instead of knowing about the pieces, I think you can do better in the game. Yeah, I think strategy counts for more compared to football knowledge in this case. General?
Yeah, I probably agree with what you said there, because if you're someone like me who watches a lot of games, you get very attached to certain players that you just like watching, and that's not always a good thing. They might not always be the best FPL pick. And just going back to kind of what's the differentiating factor, what best way to play FPL. I think nowadays there's a lot of very engaged managers who've been playing for a long time. We've all got similar, knowledge of the game and how FPL works, and knowledge of the Premier League and players. And I just think it's all a lot of it's your mentality now. It's all psychological. It's how you manage the information. It's how you process things. It's how you manage yourself after a bad game week, which we talked about. It's so much of it nowadays, I think, is in your head, and how you manage yourself, and little things like how much time you spend on social media or in forums and stuff. And you've got to really focus on that side of the game as much as picking X or Y player and picking your captain.
Completely agree with you. I think really self-management is a big part of it. And that's not just not being emotional, knowing your biases, knowing how much time to devote to it, what to look at, what not to look at. Completely agree with you there.
I'm just happy for you, Zoff. The last question we have, you and General are agreeing. I'm just
Absolutely.
So happy.
Finish out.
Nice way
finish on a very calm note.
Yeah.
Comforting.
Mark, what about you? Do you
Yeah,
think there's
I don't think there's one. There's just so many things that feed into it nowadays, and I always laugh when you, the guy who wins it, the girl who wins it, always gets asked, what was the secret? What did you win? And I remember Josh Ball going, I don't know. I really don't know. and that really sums it up, because it's just so many things that, a drop of a hat, you'll think this instead of that. And obviously luck and variance, and, maybe he saw something in a player that others didn't. You just can't pinpoint it, right? So you're right. Like you can't take a football fan and then automatically they're going to be guaranteed to be great at FPL. And when we're doing this with the apprentice at the moment, we're taking someone who has good knowledge of football, giving them no strategy whatsoever, and seeing how they get on, compared to someone who has less knowledge about football and giving them lots of strategy and see how they get on. Right. So we'll see. We're trying to figure it out. It is fascinating, but I don't think we're going to find one thing or another that's the overriding, this is the thing you've got to do to be good at it. It's very, very difficult to pinpoint it. If there was a way, someone would be selling it by now, wouldn't they? But so, it's many, many things, isn't it? And I think what's great is, though, that every season we see a lot of, people in the community doing well consistently. And I think what that reinforces for me is that there is a skill to it. And we're not wasting our time by creating content, trying to help others, by doing that, right? Because if it was all down to luck, it'd make a mockery really of what we do as content creators. So it is reassuring that in any given season, a lot of us do well, or many, the names we know in the community do well. And it reinforces what we really know is part of that is skill, right? And that's good.
Yeah, it's fascinating because we were doing a pod a couple of weeks later where we have Soren, who's the guy who's created Draft Horn, and he this was his quote to me, where he said that I haven't seen a game of football in the past 2 years, and he finished in the top 200 last year, and he's doing it. He likes watching football, but he's doing it because watching football is noise. So he's so stats focused, and he's created Draft Horn, so he knows what he's talking about. So I wonder how that's going to be. It's fascinating. Tom, last words.
I would just echo what you guys have said. There's nothing really to add. It's a combination of so many factors. But it's interesting you say that about, I know people who hardly watch any football and have had brilliant seasons and rely on data. I know there's been seasons in many years ago with me when I didn't watch as much football and I had very good seasons. So it doesn't, having a good eye for watching a game, it doesn't, it's not a deciding factor. There's other ways to play the game. But yeah, a combination of so many things. And you always get asked, don't you, how do you do it, kind of thing. And it's kind of an impossible question to answer, really.
Yeah, I think we've spoken here for the best part of 2 hours and nobody really knows what the right answer is. I mean, I can't wait to sit on Sunday and watch this with a peaceful mind and just take in what I can from this entire conversation. But I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of you. All of the guests on our panel came in 5 minutes before the time we asked them to. So it just speaks of the kind of people that they are. And thank you so much for taking 2 hours out with us. We're hoping that people enjoy this conversation. Zoff, any last words?
Nothing much. Thanks for coming on. Pleasure talking to everyone.
And good luck this season, guys. We're hoping that one of us is a future FPL champion. That would just make me really, really happy. If somebody from here won FPL, one day it would be bloody great.
Fantastic. Right.
All right, so that's it from us. Make sure you're hitting like and subscribe, and we'll see you Monday. Take care, guys.
See you soon.
Thanks, guys.